Okay. A lot of people on Facebook were going, what are you going to talk about this week? Is it going to be 3 hours long or 4 hours long? And I said, I'm quitting. So I'm not, but it was a crazy week. I was out of town for a couple days in a court hearing over in Indianapolis, working on a big bankruptcy. So if you need any appliances, you might want to check out H.H. Gregg because they're going out of business. So I was in court about that. They said they were trying to find a buyer, and they had until 5 o'clock, and then Pam said she heard on the news about 5:30 that they were going out of business sales, so they didn't get that buyer they were talking about in court. I don't represent H.H. Gregg, just one of the creditors. And it's always neat, though, is you go to those things, and there's like 40, 50 attorneys in the courtroom, and some of these are from New York, and these guys bill at $800 an hour and that type of thing. And so you start adding up the hourly rate that's in that courtroom, and you understand why they went bankrupt. So, well, on cruise control. So today I'm going to try to cover topics. You know, we always talk about the convergence of things and how geopolitically the world seems to be in a mess. So I'm going to cover a little bit of church stuff going on, culture, politics in the U.S., and then we'll talk about Middle East and Syria specifically. But I have to tell you, Friday, as I was starting to prepare and think about this, and I was at lunch over in Indianapolis reading through some things and checking my Facebook feed about all the things going on in Syria and everybody's opinion about what is going on in Syria. And it was, regardless of your opinion, okay? First of all, none of us are there and none of us know exactly what's going on. But it was insanity, and people were fighting and arguing, and if you don't believe me, you're part of the New World Order. I mean, it was craziness. And it matched the driving on the road Saturday or Friday was just, even Pam mentioned it when she got home. She said, came home from an aunt's funeral and out of town, and she's like, just like crazy people on the roads. It was like collective madness. I mean, people driving 22 miles an hour on the freeway and the passing lane. And anyway, it's a good thing that I'm such a patient man when I drive. I do wish they had a little Sidewinder missile option on right next to the cruise control button on your car, because it would solve a lot of problems. Look, folks, there's a big women's conference coming up called Belong 2017. They're selling it. You have to buy tickets in groups of 10. I guess they just assume that you're going to do this. And listen, some of these people have major theological issues. I won't go into it. Jen Hatmaker in the center, she and her husband did a show on HGTV about redoing an old house, and they have 47 kids or something like that. And she talks at these conferences, and she and Beth Moore, they're really tight. And she talks about the fact that, listen, we need to get off this gay marriage thing. We need to celebrate the gay marriages of our friends and not judge them and that type of thing. The lady on the left in that picture is Shauna Nyquist. Her parents are Bill and Lynn Hybels. And sometime I'm going to have to go through the Lynn Hybels document that I was able to obtain from the Catalyst West conference about 3 years ago, and her crisis of faith. And you need to pray for her, because the stuff that she writes about in her crisis of faith, there's some serious questions there about her faith. And so I don't want to, I don't get to make the final call on that type of thing, but it's a concern that I have, because she's incredibly influential, and she goes to these conferences, and now her daughter, the next generation, is kind of moving that along. So I think this is a conference that you can say to avoid. But it'll sell big tickets, and they have them all over the country. And so don't go to belongtour.com. Just take my word for it. This was an interesting study. This was an article in the New York Times, front page, New York Times the other day. HPV, human papilloma virus, thank you, infects close to half of all U.S. adults, according to a recent study by the Center for Disease Control. Here's some of the stats that they found, particularly this one here on the left. You see out of the total population, dark blue, 42.5% of the U.S. adult population is infected with some kind of strain of genital HPV. 45% of men and 39% of women. When you go over to the very serious HPV that there is, you see that the numbers are total infection of about 23% of the U.S. adult population is infected with this STD, the sexually transmitted disease. Over 1 out of 5 adults in the U.S. 25% of men and 20% of women. Those are stunning numbers. I don't know if I've shared this before. My wife shared this once. She went to her OB-GYN appointment, and the doctor asked her, you know, how many sexual partners have you had in your life? And she said 1. And I'm grateful for, especially when you look at statistics like that, I'm incredibly grateful for that. But she asked the doctor, well, what kind of answers do you get? And Pam, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was under age 30, under age 21, the average number was 77 different sexual partners. I know you're shocked at this, but so it's no wonder that we have rape, and this is just HPV. This isn't herpes, this isn't syphilis, this isn't gonorrhea or anything like that, which are developing, some of those are developing disease-resistant strains, or antibiotic-resistant strains. Okay. He was participating in, okay, she's correcting me, or she's giving me additional information. It's a national study that he was participating in, and the numbers are shocking. And we wonder why we have all these problems when we're not just ignoring God's basic design, we are just flaunting it in God's face. Which leads to this little interesting back and forth that happened this week. Mike Pence came out. There was an article in the Washington Post that did a interview, a profile on Mike Pence's wife, Karen. And in there, she said that, this is what was written by the Ashley Parker in her profile. In 2002, Mike Pence told The Hill that he never eats alone with a woman other than his wife, and that he won't attend events featuring alcohol without her by his side either. Well, the reaction to this, on the Christian side, it's, well, that's good that he has that standard and that he loves his wife that much, that he respects her that much, and that she's that important to him. To the response, I think the majority of the response was, what is he, some kind of nut? What is he, anti-woman? Does he hate feminists? Does he hate women? That he would do this? And it's like, you know, the interesting thing is, when the left does this, these are the same people that if we say, you know, we have problems with homosexuality, oh, you judge! You can't judge! Oh, and to the person who asked me if I was going to yell this week, I guess the answer is yes. I didn't think I would, but there we go. What am I, 10 minutes in? And, but they judge more than anybody else. They project all the time. Anytime you want to see what they're complaining about, know that they're more guilty of it than anybody. It's like, we need to help. You don't help the poor. And then you look at the tax returns of Al Gore, you know, and he makes $1 million and he gives like, what, 27 cents to charity. And the reason is they consider their taxes to be charity. You understand that? So one of the differences between left and right is the right want to pay fewer taxes and they give more money to charity. The left wants you to support their charity. Get it? But they're not in control now. Now they're really going crazy. But this guy from The Guardian in New York, this is what he wrote. How different is VP Mike Pence from Orthodox Muslim men? Mike Pence doesn't eat alone with women. So he's the Taliban. It's insanity. The vice president's rule is insulting for men and limiting for women. But let's not let Pence's sexism distract us from his whole party's sexist agenda. Even Bret Stephens at the Wall Street Journal, who in the past I've liked his articles, but my question is, did he fall and hit his head? Because he tweeted this. He tweeted this, the guy that wrote this thing, and then he said, the calling card of all religious fundamentalism, terror of women. I don't know what's happened to him. He's written some great stuff in the past, but he's lost it. To equate Mike Pence with a fundamentalist Islamic imam or whatever remember my scale, idiocy was down here, imbecile was here, moron was here. Okay, here's a comment I did make. Was it whenever it was I used that scale last week. You know, it's interesting in Romans chapter 1 that God uses the word moron. He gives them over to a reprobate mind. As one apologist has said, God morons the world because of their sexual licentiousness and all this other thing. So it's interesting that on the scale, IQ scale, God only puts you here. If you go down here any lower, it's self-inflicted. You know, in other words, you got to go to graduate school to move further down than what God would put you at. And I'm afraid Bret Stephens has. I'm sure I won't get invited to the Wall Street Journal Christmas party again this year. It's because I haven't in the past. And then Planned Parenthood, when Gorsuch got confirmed, and I like the way they did that. That stupid filibuster rule. The Constitution puts supermajorities in there for certain things. And the only reason they put that filibuster rule in that was so easy to invoke is so that people like Lindsey Graham and John McCain can think they're more important and powerful than they really should be. You know, they've turned into these, they forget who they serve. Not themselves or their egos, they serve the people. And so the Senate has become this collection of people on a power trip. And so I'm glad that they got rid of this filibuster rule, and now a simple majority will decide Supreme Court justices and a number of other things. But look at what Planned Parenthood said. Breaking, the Senate just confirmed Neil Gorsuch after changing the rules to do it. We object to a SCOTUS nominee who will take us backwards. We're going back to the Stone Age in women's rights. That remains to be seen. I think there are some reasons to be. You never know with the Supreme Court justice. You can appoint somebody that you think is good, and they may be good for a while, and then they get older and softer, and you know, they turn out to not be so good, and they make bad decision after bad decision, like Anthony Kennedy. I think now the Republicans could actually nominate a cyborg Ruth Ginsburg, and the Democrats would oppose the cyborg Ruth Ginsburg. So that's just my opinion. To save American oh, this is a professor at Cal State Fresno. Fresno has some of the highest drug abuse rates in the country. I'm not saying that this guy is, though, okay? Don't just judge what he says. To save American democracy, Trump must hang. The sooner and the higher, the better. The resistance, pound, death to fascism. He also tweeted this: I am not surprised that fascists should equate the demand for justice with advocacy for murder or violence. Wait a minute. It is advocacy for murder or violence because you said he should hang. It comes naturally to them. Here's another tweet from him. Justice equals the execution of 2 Republicans for each deported immigrant. Ethnic cleansing, climate genocide, subversion. This was just yesterday. Ethnic cleansing, climate genocide, subversion of voting rights, and propaganda. Trump runs a terror regime. They did contact the president of Cal State Fresno, and he said he's entitled to his own opinion, and his opinion is not the opinion of the university. But try to speak out against it in his class and see what kind of grade you get. It's the chill speech. And the guy is, well, he lives in Fresno. Not that so does Victor Davis Hanson, but that's neither here nor there. So let's talk just a minute about unmasking and masking. Ramirez it used to be at Investors Business Daily until they shut. He was the editorial page editor there. I used to love that editorial page. The unmasking and spying were caused by a video. So I'm going to play you a couple things. The first thing I'm going to play on the left is Susan Rice on March 22nd. The one on the right is Susan Rice this week. I think it was on Tuesday, April 4th. So here's the first one on PBS with Judy Woodruff.
In the last few hours, we've been following a disclosure by the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, that in essence, during the final days of the Obama administration, during the transition after President Trump had been elected, that he and the people around him may have been caught up in surveillance of foreign individuals and that their identities may have been disclosed. Do you know anything about this?
I know nothing about this. I was surprised to see reports from Chairman Nunes on that count today.
I have to tell you, I watch body language as an attorney because when I question people, and I mean, she is really breathing very deeply when she gives that interview. So I know nothing. So the Sergeant Schultz of the Obama administration was then interviewed this week, and here's what she had to say in response to Andrea Mitchell on, this is just a couple-minute clip out of a 16-minute interview.
This is a firestorm. It is involved with the whole question of the Russia investigation, of the response by President Trump, and now these accusations against you. How do you reply? How do you respond?
Well, Andrea, this is not anything political has been alleged. The allegation is that somehow Obama administration officials utilized intelligence for political purposes. That's absolutely false. Let me explain how this works.
Okay, now she can explain how.
I was a national security advisor. My job is to protect the American people and the security of our country. That's the same as the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the CIA director. And every morning, to enable us to do that, we receive from the intelligence community a compilation of intelligence reports that the IC, the intelligence community, has selected for us on a daily basis to give us the best information as to what's going on around the world. I received those reports, as did each of those other officials, and there were occasions when I would receive a report in which a U.S. person was referred to, name not provided, just U.S. person. And sometimes in that context, in order to understand the importance of the report and assess its significance, it was necessary to find out or request the information as to who that U.S. official was. Let me give you just a hypothetical example. This is completely made up, but let's say there was a conversation between two foreigners about a conversation they were having with an American who was proposing to sell to them high-tech bomb-making equipment. Now, if that came to me as National Security Advisor, it would matter enormously. Is this some kook sitting in his living room communicating via the internet offering to sell something he doesn't have? Or is this a serious person or company or entity with the ability to provide that technology, perhaps to an adversary? That would be an example of a case where knowing who the U.S. person was necessary to assess the information. So when that occurred, what I would do, or what any official would do, is to ask their briefer whether the intelligence community would go through its process, and there's a long-standing established process, to decide whether that information as to who the identity of the U.S. person was could be provided to me.
Well, she got her memory back, I guess. Somebody refreshed it, and now she knows exactly how everything is done. Now, I will give CNN credit for this analysis of the two different things, the I don't know and I know parts that she did. So here's CNN talking about John King and another analyst.
Not to be a jerk here, but will the real Susan Rice please stand up?
Yeah, the second part of that, the one on MSNBC, is a perfectly logical explanation of how unmasking works. The problem is the previous comment in which she denies any knowledge of it. So she can't in the same breath.
Right, welcome to the witness list.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Welcome to the witness list. So here's a couple-minute clip of Caroline Glick. Usually on Tuesdays, she does a Facebook Live with Avi Avigan, I can't remember his last name, Abelo. And you can catch it on her Facebook page. And here's what she was talking about this week about some of the things that were going on in the the Obama administration in the last days, which are, I think you'll understand the import of this.
But that was like nothing. I mean, here what we're talking about is an abuse of the intelligence community.
The first thing she talked about was when the Clintons left, remember how they took all the W keys off, they poured glue on keyboards, they took cables away so you couldn't use, there was nothing. Bush came in and they couldn't use any of the equipment there in the executive office building and White House because of the kids had left and had done what little kids do, when they're vandalizing things. So now she's talking about what the Trump administration does, the Obama administration. See, I've already written it out of my mind. The Obama administration did on their way out the door.
Massive abuses of intelligence information, abuses of federal hiring procedures in order to block. So Lemkin, to your initial question, Lempert, I think. Whatever, Lempert. Her thing is that she is State Department. She is a Foreign Service officer. She is tenured Foreign Service. She's been in there for, 15 years. She's been seated. And so what they do is they detail people from the relevant government agencies to the National Security Council. She had a tour of duty at the National Security Council. Usually it's for 2 years, and then they go back to their agency. So her tour at the NSC was coming to an end. And so what Ben Rhodes did, or Obama, or whatever, is they reinstated her for an additional 2 years. So it's like an official posting, right, as a professional. And so now Trump has to figure out a way, or McMaster, his national security advisor, whatever, they have to figure out a way to get rid of a woman who was just given a seated position at the National Security Council, who's a career professional from the State Department. And so it's difficult. The same thing with Michael Ratney, who was, a horrible foe of Israel and a real Obamaite, and was instrumental in the Iran deal and wrecking Syria and everything bad, essentially, that the Obama administration did in the Middle East. So Ratney was, enthusiastic participant, And now he's in charge of the Israel desk, the Palestinian desk, or whatever, the State Department. They did the same thing with him. They seated him in this position right before they left. And now Tillerson, whoever, has to figure out a way to get him out. And it's not so easy, because then it comes into all the federal procedures and the protections of federal employees. But this is par for the course. And I understand that they are interested in getting rid of them, but I don't know.
So to recap, there are people that were in political appointed positions. And so one of those people was moved over to the National Security Council. They get there for 2 years. Obama reappointed her for another 2 years, and she's anti-Israel, pro-Iran. Other people that are anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian are being put in, and when they change them into a different category in the federal bureaucracy, all sorts of rules kick in, and you just can't go in and fire them. So what Obama did was essentially embed all of these cronies throughout the federal bureaucracy. And so now Trump has a huge problem as how to get rid of him. So here's my suggestion. Go find the people that took away Phil Haney's computer and his computer privileges. Have them work on those people, take away their computers, their computer privileges, their cell phone, their email, a desk phone, put them in a little office with nothing to do, and then fire the person that did that to Phil Haney, okay? Listen, Obama was a community organizer. He knew how to play this, and he knew the rules. And they've twisted the rules or used the rules to their ability. Richard Kemp, Colonel Richard Kemp, who writes for Gatestone Institute, says, Christianity becoming a relic, Islam the religion of the future UK. Now, I have some charts, I just haven't time to pull them together into one of my presentations, that show that at least on the projections that people like at the Foreign Policy magazine and that type of thing work on, and The Economist, Islam and Christianity should become about equal around 2050, and then Islam will become the dominant religion in the world. Now again, here's the disclaimer, just because I'm talking about 2050 doesn't mean I think all this stuff is going to take till 2050. I personally think that number, that event where Islam becomes majority over Christian, and when they say Christian, they include, everybody. They include good Christians, bad Christians, non-Christians, and people that call themselves Christians, Roman Catholicism, all this stuff. They include that in that number. I think it's going to come much quicker. It's going to happen much more quickly, much more quickly, because the birth rates are much higher. The birth rates in the Christian West are collapsing. They're the lowest in the world. Germany's under Japan now, for crying out loud. Spain, Russia, and if we weren't allowing immigration into the United States, we would be below replacement levels too. I don't have time to put it in. Remind me, if I don't talk about it, I want to talk about Spengler when I get to just remind me to say Spengler when I talk about Syria before we leave. And he also talks about how the world's ignoring the Hezbollah threat to Israel, a lot of the same things there, and the massive amounts of weapons that they have, where they're embedded on the northern mountains of Israel. So let's talk about the religion of peace. And just this week, St. Petersburg, 10 people killed in a bomb blast on the train or the subway in St. Petersburg, Russia. Guess what? Muslim. And it's always, it'd be interesting. Well, I think things are changing a little bit in the world. I do think that President Trump and Nikki Haley have had some impact, and I think David Friedman, when he gets over to Israel as the ambassador, he was just sworn in the other day, I think they'll have an impact to change the way the world looks at these things, and I think you'll see that in a minute. Remember, there was the controversy a month or so ago about Donald Trump tweeting something about a terrorist attack in Sweden, and he said it happened on Saturday night, and everybody Boy, you know, for months it was, oh, Donald Trump was wrong, you know. But listen, the point was there's a major problem with Islamic immigration into Sweden and other countries. They have no-go zones. This is well established. So in response to Donald Trump's tweet, this Swedish guy, Alexander Stubb or whatever, "Dear Donald Trump, Sweden is immigration-friendly, international, and liberal. One of the most prosperous, richest, safest places on earth." Around that time, there was also this report, this was back in October, The Independent in England had talked about a Swedish city that was offering returning ISIS fighters housing and benefits in a reintegration program. Brilliant. It's just brilliant. And then this happened this week in Stockholm, in a major shopping area. A man from Uzbekistan, Muslim again, drove down a busy street running over people. I can't show you the pictures. There's a picture of a lady laying on the street, literally ripped in two by this guy. He stole a beer truck, drove down. You know, initially it was there's been a truck accident in Stockholm, and right away, what should happen? Everybody should make the default assumption that this is a terrorist attack now, because this is in their magazine that Al Qaeda puts out, Inspire. They talked about how do you do a terrorist attack? Get a truck and run people over. Well, guess what's happening now? There were 84, 86 people killed in Nice, France, in a truck attack. Now it's happening in Sweden. And if you look carefully at you see the kid here, there's a reporter talking about it near the scene of the accident. You see the Muslim kid there? Now I'm making an assumption, I guess, because I'm a racist. See him making the face there? But look at the guys on the left that are near the police officer. And somebody made the point that all the Swedish police officers that showed up to help initially appeared to look like the blonde gal from ABBA. You know, it's like, I don't know that that's going to deter anybody. And you can see these guys, look at them, they're laughing. They think it's funny. And the tweets about this, here's one from a Turkish guy. There's no difference between non-Muslims, and you see a dog that was hit there and literally ripped to shreds. There's no difference between non-Muslims and dogs for us. Don't touch to our Syrian brothers and sisters, you infidels. And he later another tweet, and whoever has not believed in Allah and his messenger, then indeed we have prepared for the disbelievers a blaze. I think the guy was caught, the suspect. They picked up 6 other people, all Muslims. He never talked politics or religion. They said the only thing he talked about was getting more jobs so he could send money home to his family. It was quickly dispelled that this was not a lone wolf attack. 6 men from Uzbekistan arrested after police operation in central Stockholm this evening. They're now being questioned. From the Telegraph, Stockholm attack driver deliberately targeted young children as he drove hijacked lorry into the crowd. They found a homemade bomb on the seat. What he did was the witnesses said, there were people walking with strollers and baby buggies and that type of thing on the street. He intentionally drove towards them when he saw the baby buggies. He's a monster. A suspected terrorist targeted young children as he drove a hijacked lorry truck into a crowded shopping street in Stockholm, witnesses claimed last night. Infants' buggies were sent flying through the air, one Swedish broadcaster reported, as the vehicle zigzagged along the pedestrian Queen Street shopping district and embedded itself in the window of a department store. It swerved from side to side. It didn't look out of control. It was trying to hit people, a second witness said. told Reuters, it hit people, it was terrible, it hit a pram with a kid in it, demolished it. And again, not a surprise, the terror suspect was known to intelligence services, Swedish police reveal. When they went to pick him up, the police officers that were doing the investigation were pelted with stones and rocks in the neighborhood where he was, which they said bordered a no-go zone. But now you know why it's a no-go zone? Because if they go in there, they get attacked like this. There was also a terror attack in Israel this week, and a young man was run over in a vehicle ramming attack. This is the update to the, remember there was the couple immigrant boys in Twin Falls, Idaho, who were supposed to have gone into a laundry room in an apartment building and sexually molested and raped a 5-year-old girl. Immediately when that was said was, oh, that's fake news, didn't happen, that's not what happened. You guys, you have this prejudice, you're just prejudiced, you're bigots, you're racists, you're Islamophobes. Well, guess what? Those 2 guys pled guilty this week. Now, will all the left-wing media that call people Islamophobes, will they apologize? Nope, because being on the left never says to have to say you're sorry. Now, there was also a thing at the, there was a Palestinian, there was an Arab summit on the Dead Sea in Jordan at a resort this week, and they had 16 heads of state from Arab countries there, and the main issue was Palestine. We got to have this 2-state peace solution. They had a number of speakers. Let's back this one up.
Conflict and displacement are widespread, and across the world, Arab and Muslim communities face growing prejudice. Too many populist political leaders have fallen into the trap of presenting the despicable acts of Daesh and Al-Qaeda as driven by Islam, when in fact they utterly defy the faith. Indeed, Muslims themselves are the primary victims. My experience as High Commissioner for Refugees showed me the true nature of Islam, as Arab countries extended remarkable hospitality to wave upon wave of people fleeing violence and persecution.
Now, okay, this is the new head of the UN. He used to head the refugee part of the UN. And so he says, well, Muslims are very friendly to other Muslims. Yeah, like all the Muslim refugees that have been accepted into Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Kuwait and Dubai and the United Arab Emirates and, well, nobody wants to go to Yemen. They have their own problems. And he's a theologian, too. I mean, not only is he able to pontificate about world peace and love, he now understands one of the major religions of the world. And, of course, this is the most important thing that he talks about.
These conflicts must not distract us from seeking to heal the longest open wound in the region, the plight of the Palestinian people. I understand the deep sense of despair of this Palestinian people. The dreams of generation after generation have been confined by half a century of occupation. Palestinians and Israelis do not need conflict management. They need conflict resolution.
And here's the EU.
Let me just mention some of the key issues where our cooperation is essential, vital. I would like to start from a just and lasting peace between Israel and Palestine. This is and will continue to be a top priority for the European Union. A peaceful solution of this conflict, or even progress in that direction, could set a whole new paradigm for cooperation in the region, including on security. We firmly believe that the 2-state solution remains the only realistic way to end the conflict and all claims. We would recognize changes to the 67 lines only when agreed by the parties, including with regard to Jerusalem.
Well, then, there's no sound on this one. It's a video. This is the head of Qatar, the Emir of Qatar. And he's talking, and what he's doing is he's saying that we need to support people, and he's saying, support the Muslim Brotherhood. Look how the king of Jordan looks at him. I mean, look at this. So I don't think he's on board with the Muslim Brotherhood thing that his brother is. And this is a problem. This is an article in Time magazine about the uranium underworld. ISIS wants a dirty bomb and it knows where to get one. And this has been talked about for a long time. And a man was recently arrested in Georgia trying to sell bags of uranium, highly radioactive uranium, to what he thought was an ISIS terrorist. And Brian handed me his cell phone. And Palm Sunday church bombings claimed by ISIS kill at least 43 in Egypt. This happened this morning. I'm going to download the internet on this. How's your data plan doing, right? Data cap. So this is a problem. The two-state solution, though, is falling in popularity in Israel. Daniel Lapid, who's the head of the Lapid Party, a left-wing party that has enough votes probably in their coalition to get close to taking over the government, he's now refusing to talk about the two-state solution. Israel doesn't, there's nobody in Israel that supports the two-state solution now. Hardly anybody. Mostly those Jews live in America. As recently as 6 months ago, Mr. Lapid was still advocating for a demilitarized Palestinian state whose capital is Ramallah in speeches and interviews no longer. 2 weeks ago at a Yesh Atid event in Netanya, he said Israel would need a 15 to 20-year period of gradual separation with the Palestinians before security considerations could allow further change. There's been some people wake up to, they've had a reality check. They're finally getting educated. But I do think, personally, that the Trump administration view on this, although they're still pushing for a two-state, but they're changing things at the UN. They're threatening to withhold funding. And so the UN people are starting to come into line. He has stopped using the term Palestinian state. That's a left-wing guy in Israel. This is stunning. Says Israel needs to separate itself from the Palestinians, but only consider allowing them a state in at least 15 years. That's why I think if this is going to unfold and this covenant and all this stuff, there's going to be some major changes. And it may be, I personally think it's something that could still be, the word used there is gabar, which can mean forced. It can be forced upon the Israelis. I know a lot of people disagree with that. But we need, I think we need a big sit down to talk about how this stuff is going to play out. Caroline Glick has an article on Tuesday called Leaving the Big Tent, and I don't really have time to go through that. You can look that up. That was in the Tuesday Jerusalem Post. And she did relate a thing that happened at a conference at a synagogue in Brookline, Massachusetts. And a lady got up and she said, she's left-wing obviously, "You are losing me and you are losing many, many people in the Jewish community. I cannot look the other way when 3 Israeli teenagers are brutally murdered and the response is to kill 2,300 Palestinians. I want to know what you are doing to make peace with the Palestinians. I want to know what the government is doing to make peace." Speaking last, a Likud member of the Knesset, Amir Ohana, noted that Israel didn't enter into its war with Hamas 3 years ago because of the execution and abduction of the 3 used by Palestinian terrorists. Israel went to war against Hamas in Operation Protective Edge because the terrorist regime in Gaza was pummeling Israel with tens of thousands of mortars, rockets, and missiles. And as Ohana noted, each and every one of them was targeted to kill us. He concluded, essentially, "Lady, if I have to choose between losing more lives as Israeli, whether they are civilians or soldiers, or losing you, I will sadly, sorrowfully rather lose you." Good for him. And then the Jewish Voices of Peace invited this convicted terrorist to their conference in Chicago last week to speak. And they talked about, how she was oppressed, she was part of Israeli apartheid. And this is a Jewish organization. And look who they had speak at the conference. Rasmia Oda, who in the meantime has pled guilty to immigration violation and will be deported. Linda Sarsour, Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas activist. And then this guy from South Africa, he's a professor at the University of Johannesburg, supposedly an expert, he's Muslim, Fareed Essek. And so they invited all these Muslims. It's just crazy. Here's something interesting, though. Moscow recognized this week, they said West Jerusalem is Israel's capital. Wow. Israel Today said, has hell frozen over? Because at another conference, this one at the bottom here, ECI, and I can't remember what it stands for right now, calls Jerusalem the ancient capital of Israel. UNESCO Director General reaffirms. This is people who say Israel has no right to the Temple Mount, all this stuff. She comes out and says, well, yeah, I say that in my job, but privately, she shared this with a guy who she authorized to share at the thing, and said she's firmly rebuffed any attempts to deny Jewish history connected to Jerusalem. In a unique statement at the ECI Policy Conference in the European Parliament on Thursday, she said that in the Torah, Jerusalem is the capital of King David, where Solomon built the temple and placed the Ark of the Covenant. Distinguishing between her role as the highest official of UNESCO and the resolutions passed by member states of the same organization, she stated, to deny, conceal, or erase any of the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions undermines the integrity of the site and runs counter to the reasons that justifies inscription in the UNESCO World Heritage List. You know what? I think hell did freeze over. That's stunning. Maybe it did. Listen, the protection of the heritage of Jerusalem is part of the broader vision for peace and the fight against all forms of denial of Jewish history. The legitimization of Israel and anti-Semitism, she said. UNESCO is the United Nations Specialized Agency for Education, Science, and Culture. And I'm thinking, like, they must have, like, maybe they do have that brainwave machine to change people's minds, and she's a guinea pig for that. But it went further than that. The vice president of the European Parliament, you know, the one where Nigel Farage gets up and yells at him when he was still there, gave the Israeli government credit for protecting all the holy sites after recapturing Jerusalem in 1967. In a written statement, he acknowledged that the Jewish people have had a long history in his native Poland, but pointed out that no other city can illustrate Jewish identity and aspirations more than Jerusalem. So, maybe hell did freeze over. And maybe we'll be able to play golf in January in North Dakota. I'm on board with that. Oh, by the way, there is an official stamp that we can put on this, what we just read as not fake news. So I'll have to use that more in the future. Nikki Haley went to the Women in the World Conference. Remember, that's the one where Hillary went and said we need to change people's minds and deep-seated religious beliefs need to be changed. By the way, Hillary was there, praised and fawned over by everybody. Nikki Haley talked about Trump standing up to Russia and trying to make us energy independent, and immediately boos erupted from the crowd there, the thousands that were there. And Greta Van Susteren, you know, she used to be on Fox, and people loved her when she was on Fox. So it's MSNBC now. Her questions were, she's gone. Okay, she probably was left-wing before. There's no doubt about it now. The questions that she asked of Nikki were rude. You can find these on the internet, and all the people, well, there's a thing I can't even talk about that were discussed by the women on the stage. I didn't see any transgender people there, so I think they're discriminating. They're bigots. John McCain, John McCain's sort of launching himself into Barack Obama category where I have to apologize for even putting his picture up. But he was at a Brussels summit for the EU and said, you know, we've got to revive this new world order. This is our last chance to get the new world order. He's a globalist. He's gone, okay? So when people talk about neocons and that type of thing, it's true. Okay, Syria. What's that? Okay, Spengler. I'm not there yet. Remind me before I sit down. Even that's why I'm going to get past that 12 o'clock time that you're. Here is a little thing about Syria. This is a video. Is there sound on it?
Each side with foreign backers, and those foreign backers don't even agree with each other on who they're fighting for and who they're fighting against. And now, Syria's use of chemical weapons has provoked President Donald Trump to directly attack Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. This is a major development because up until now, the US has only been focused on fighting ISIS. To understand the crisscrossing interventions and battle lines in Syria today and how it got this way, it helps to go back to the beginning of the conflict and watch to see how it unfolded. The first shots in the war were fired in March 2011 by Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad against peaceful Arab Spring demonstrators. In July, the protesters start shooting back, and some Syrian troops even defect from the Syrian army to join them. They call themselves the Free Syrian Army, and the uprising becomes a civil war. Extremists from around the region and the world start traveling to Syria to join the rebels. Now, Assad actually encourages this by releasing jihadist prisoners to tinge the rebellion with extremism and make it harder for foreign backers to support them. In January 2012, Al-Qaeda forms a new branch in Syria, Jabhat al-Nusra. Also around that time, Syrian Kurdish groups who had long sought autonomy take up arms and informally secede from Assad's rule in the north. That summer is when Syria becomes a proxy war. Iran, Assad's most important ally, intervenes on his behalf. And by the end of 2012, Iran is sending daily cargo flights and has hundreds of officers on the ground. At the same time, the oil-rich Arab states in the Persian Gulf begin sending money and weapons to the rebels, mainly to counter Iran's influence. Iran steps up its influence in turn in mid-2012 when Hezbollah, a Lebanese militia backed by Iran, invades to fight along Assad. In turn, the Gulf states respond, Saudi Arabia really stepping up this time to send more money and weapons to the rebels, this time through Jordan, who also opposes Assad. By 2013, the Middle East is divided between mostly Sunni powers generally supporting the rebels and Shias generally supporting Assad. That April, the Obama administration, horrified by Assad's atrocities and the mounting death toll, signs a secret order authorizing the CIA to train and equip Syrian rebels. But the program stalls. At the same time, the US quietly urges Arab Gulf states to stop funding extremists, but their requests basically go ignored. In August, the Assad regime uses chemical weapons against civilians, provoking condemnation from around the world.
Men, women, children lying in rows, killed by poison gas. It is in the national security interests of the United States to respond to the Assad regime.
Now look, this is very controversial. People say that we did it, that the New World Order did it, and my personal opinion is it's still not clear who did it. But listen, what has happened is that Assad now has become like the greatest Christian protector on the planet. The man is an evil creep. His father gassed over 30,000 or 28 or 30,000 villagers in one village for opposing him. They've assassinated leaders in Lebanon, the Assad family. So get off of this notion that Assad is this wonderful, genteel guy. He's not, okay? Now, he may be less bad than all the others in this. So, listen, so there was this, you can go to Vox Media on YouTube and watch that whole video. It's very instructive as to how complicated the situation is in Syria. So there was this another chemical attack. We say our government says we have proof. I've seen video or slides of the route that was flown from this air base that Trump sent the cruise missiles into. 59 cruise missiles, over $1 million each. And their video, there's indication they did flight tracking, and they flew from there. And whether they dropped chemicals or not, or they dropped the bomb that hit a chemical store and caused the problem, They also went and bombed the local hospital. So don't tell me that Assad is perfect, okay? Now, listen, I'm not saying get rid of Assad either, because it's a volatile situation. It's complicated, and if you get rid of Assad, you end up with another Iraq like we had when we got rid of Hussein and didn't finish the job there. You know, I mean, we created a vacuum, and now what's filled the vacuum is all sorts of, I think you only can describe them as demonically inspired people. So all these things, these missiles were sent in from a couple destroyers. They attacked this air base. Here's a little, this is a Russian sort of drone or airplane video of some of the things that happened there. There were a number of sites that were attacked, but interestingly enough, they had enough advance that they had these hardened bunkers that looked like ancient stone arches. Here's a high-resolution picture of them. And they put the planes in there. So they know they're going to be attacked, so what do? They move the planes off the runway, and the cruise missiles are programmed to go in there. The interesting thing about the cruise missiles is these things fly from the ship. They go about 600 miles an hour, 560 miles an hour. And what happened was they can't launch them all at once. The early ones that were launched, they got there, and the way they're designed, they hovered essentially over the site. Then when all the others came in, they all went in at the same time. It's things. So here's some of the things, the planes that are moved off the runway. And there's a lot of damage, but they were using the air base the next day. So don't tell me that Assad is perfect. In fact, one of the evidences of that is this. There are many drone pictures. This is a part of Damascus taken about at least 6 months ago. And you look at as you look at this thing flying around, what you see is just massive devastation. The rebels driving around in pickup trucks with big machine guns and that, they don't do that. You have to bomb those things from the air. And the rebels and ISIS don't have an air force. Now, people will say that we do it, but there's, you know, I just read a lot from the Institute for the Study of War. I mean, when Isaiah talks about Damascus being a ruinous heap, and you see half the city roughly looking like this, you're thinking like, that prophecy could easily be fulfilled, and maybe one night with a massive attack. But look, it's very difficult. As I said, as I was looking at this Friday, everybody has an opinion. Daniel Greenfield at Front Page Mag had one of the best posts, and he just said, listen, folks, we're not there. We don't know exactly what's going on. It may have been the rebels that did it. It may have been an accidental hit from a bomb. But Syria may have, and Russia may have dropped it intentionally. We don't know. You know, our government, and everybody's upset with Trump now that is on the right, a lot of people on the right. They're moving away from Trump because now he's a neocon and he's under the influence of John McCain and Lindsey Graham, who I don't even know if they've been at the White House. But there are people that are globalists within our government. They're embedded there, and I think some of them have jobs. So I don't know what the exact answer is. I know that, listen, Russia has been up to no good. Institute for Study of War has a great PDF out there, understandingwar.org. I'm going to be about 3 more minutes. Key takeaway: Russian President Vladimir Putin's primary objective in Syria is to constrain U.S. freedom of action, not fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Russia's military deployments at current levels will not enable the Iranian-penetrated Assad regime to secure Syria. Moscow's deepening footprint in Syria threatens America's ability to defend its interests across the Middle East and in the Mediterranean Sea. The next U.S. step in Syria must help regain leverage over Russia rather than further encourage Putin's expansionism. And Putin, you know, he does these things like I saw a lot of people, oh, it's World War III. Look, they sent this Russian frigate through the Bosphorus and it's steaming towards our 2 destroyers that launched the missiles. Calm down. That ship is diesel powered. You can look at the pictures as it's going through the Bosporus in Istanbul, and there's smoke coming out of it like crazy. It runs at about 15 to 20 knots when it's operating. Our destroyers are nuclear powered and can cruise at 40 knots. I mean, you could maybe even water ski behind this thing. Okay? So that ship is no threat. It does have cruise missiles, right? And our destroyers, they have cloaking ability. They can make themselves invisible to incoming weapons. But, you know, Russia's upgrading their weapons too. So it is an area of concern, but I don't think it's doing. This morning it was reported that Assad has gone in and bombed those Assad and Russia have now gone in and bombed the city where the chemical attack occurred. And look, part of this is, you remember the little video said Sunnis are here, and you have the Sunni nations are supporting the Sunni rebels and Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra, but maybe not ISIS. And then the Shias and Alawites, which is what the sect is that Assad belongs to, even though people say he's not really a very good Alawite, they're trying to create this Shia crescent across the north. And Putin has thrown in with the Shias to get rid of the Sunnis. 12 million people have left Syria, refugees. 12 million out of 21. Over 600,000 are dead. That's close to what were killed in our civil war here in the United States. That's out of a population of 21 million people, 600,000 known dead, over 600,000. So Spengler, Greenfield wrote a great article, and you can look it up on Front Page Mag, and he links to a 2012 article, or 2012 article from Spengler, who writes for the Asia Times, and his name is David Goldman. We'll try to I'll give Brian a link to put in the description of this video on YouTube. You should read that article, because essentially what David Goldman says is, listen, Saddam was a bad guy. He was a Ba'athist. His political kin was a Ba'athist named Bashar al-Assad, or Hafiz al-Assad, who took over Syria in the 60s. And they were both evil, bad people. They were minority, the sects that they came from within Islam and their party were minorities. And the only reason they were able to keep it together was because they were able to play everybody off against each other and keep them killing. And so you have a problem. We saw what happened in Iraq when whether you agree whether we went in there or not for valid purposes. The thing is a mess. And it's causing us problems with Muslim immigration and terrorism all over the world. I mean, how many cities did we see attacked just this week? So, I mean, you can say whatever we did in Iraq, the way we finished it was very, very bad. And we have to be careful that we not do anything more to create a vacuum in Syria. Because this is, oh man, there's so much more I could go through. Zechariah 9, very interesting passage. Let me just finish with this. The burden of the word of the Lord is against the land of Hadrach, with Damascus as its resting place. In fact, I think that Zechariah 9 is one of the last prophetic wars that we will see in this period of time leading up to the Lord's second coming. Don't know when, there's no time stamp on it, but I think it's what's happened. And look at what it says, though. Just listen to the places that it describes that are involved in this. And Hamath also, which borders on it, Tyre and Sidon, though they are very wise, for Tyre built herself a fortress and piled up silver like dust and gold like the mire of the streets. Behold, the Lord will dispossess her and cast her wealth into the sea, and she will be consumed with fire. Now, some of these have double fulfillments, these prophecies, and I think this might be one. But listen, here's the description that I think is relevant. Ashkelon will see it and be afraid. Gaza too will writhe in great pain. Also Ekron, for her expectation has been confounded. Moreover, the king will perish from Gaza, and Ashkelon will not be inhabited. And a mongrel grace will dwell in Ashdod, and I will cut off the pride of the Philistines. That's the area of Gaza. And I will remove their blood from their mouth and their detestable things from between their teeth. And they will also be a remnant for our God and be like a clan in Judah, and Ekron will be like a Jebusite. And then it goes on, it talks about verse 8, and I will encamp about mine house because of the army, because of him that passeth by, and because of him that returneth, and no oppressor shall pass through them any more, for now I have seen with mine eyes. And then it's interesting that in Zechariah 9, where it talks about this, what I think is a future war, I think it's related to Isaiah 17. It sort of gives you more details about Isaiah 17 than just the destruction of Damascus, because the king disappears from Damascus, and that's the capital of Syria, and we look to be on that cup right now. Sorry. But in Zechariah 9, listen to what the next verses are. Verse 9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly, and riding upon an ass, upon a colt, the foal of an ass. That's today. Okay? And then it goes on. But I think it also relates to the Lord's second coming, because it identifies the Lord as the one who's going to kind of come back. And I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, and the horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall speak peace unto the heathen, and his dominion shall be from sea even to sea, and from river even unto the ends of the earth. But it talks about clearing up a problem in Ephraim and clearing up a problem in Jerusalem. That's what the Arab Summit was about this week. Ephraim is the area of the West Bank, what's called the West Bank. And Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, they claim is their capital. I think all this is really like right on the verge of unfolding. And I have some other things. I think I'm going to do them next week at the beginning, because I think they will blow your mind. And they happen to do with the daily readings set up for Jewish people on certain dates in history. And there's a 50th anniversary coming up, and we'll look at the readings that were on that day, and we'll be on the anniversary date that they celebrated this year. But we don't have time, and I'm out of time. So let's pray. Father, Lord, I just pray that you will cover us with the comfort of knowing that you are in control of everything, that you have a plan, and that the situation in the world, while be troubling to us, will come about just as your prophets prophesied over 2,000 years ago. Comfort us with those words and the knowledge that the fulfillment of prophecy means that our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ returns and sets up his kingdom for 1,000 years. And by that, you will be glorified. We pray that those days will come and be fulfilled exactly as your prophet said. Bless us as we go this week in Jesus' name.